Sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm just going to go and get my foot thing. It's not here. I'll be back in a second.
We have today with us visitors in terms of our two youth councillors representing the youth council today, Nathaniel and Cassie. Welcome. We have a full attendance of the committee, albeit that one of them is by radio or telephone link. Rachel, welcome.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chair.
We wish you a speedy recovery.
Thank you.
As part of the meeting today, we have had no apologies, full attendance as I said. Apart from the difference of having Rachel on board through the communication means, we are also communicating as always to the world through our live streaming. We're on YouTube.
Yeah. Would it be appropriate now, seeing we are talking to the world and the community, to fully introduce our two new members to the Governance Committee? I'm thinking of Mr. John Peters and Mr. John Murray. If they could introduce themselves to the meeting.
I hear your suggestion. Yes, they've been members before. Welcome, John. Thank you, Councillor Courtney.
Not offering any further details and not allowed to stand and introduce themselves to the wider community and the world.
Councillor Courtney. Right, so we have the situation where we're going to ask you to consider your interests, if you have any particular item in the agendas, and I've been notified of one area where there is, and of course to upgrade your interest register. And then in public forum, we're being very lenient and allowing James Skollick and Erica Richards to have 5 minutes. They were presented to an earlier committee public forum, so it's not usual for us to allow you again, but I'm very lenient this morning, so please join the table and you have 5 minutes. Right, Dave. Sorry, please.
Good morning, thanks for taking the time to listen to us. My name's James Skoltock and this is Erica Richards. We currently run Vertical Limits, which is the local indoor climbing wall in 34 Vanguard Street. We did a presentation to the Sport and Rec Committee recently to try and get some support with building a new building. The current building we're in now is owned by, was bought in November last year by Gibbons Construction, and going to be demolishing it early next year, and our lease won't be extended. So we've been trying really hard to find a new location, either to purchase a building or to find another lease, which we've found extremely difficult. Earlier in the year, I talked to council about the Reliance building on Haven Road, and I was told that it was unavailable and most likely going to be torn down. Then recently, Erica had some communications with the men's shed, and they said that they'd leased it for a short term. And once again, we contacted the council about it. What did you find?
So what I was told was that the men's shed had a short-term 1-year lease, and that after that time the building would not be up for lease again. They didn't give me concrete information as to the plans of the building, just that it would not be available for lease. So that kind of stymied us, and we went, well, what other options? And that's what brought us to the Sports and Rec Committee meeting, asking for some financial support. Now we have some other information that that building may be available as it's part of your whole waterfront redevelopment plan. And from our vantage, a climbing gym fits perfectly into that plan. like for a model of something that's already operational, you could look at Wellington and look at Fergs. It's a great way to draw people into the waterfront. It's a healthy, active business that again kind of feels like it fits with the perception that we want outsiders and locals to have of our Nelson community. And also we're here, and we need to make this really clear, is we are here because we've got a lot of people depending on us. We've got a whole community that we feel as though we're supporting, not only our customers, but the local schools who are using us for their training, for their students, for the outdoor ed programs. We've got our kids clubs, we've got social workers who are bringing their kids in. So we feel like we've got a responsibility to do the best we can to try and keep a gym running. So that's why basically we're here today, is to look at the viability of that Reliance building. Do you want to add something? Sorry.
That's your 5 minutes.
Yeah, it goes
Okay.
quick.
Sorry? Oh, 3. You've got 2 more minutes. So if you want anyone to have the ability to ask questions, complete your presentation pretty quickly.
Okay.
Anything to add?
Well, I think we could add, there are a couple of things that we've looked at with the Reliance building. Our understanding is that there's that main warehouse that we would kind of look at as that heritage warehouse. We're aware that parking is an issue, especially with the state highway there. So one option that we have kind of envisioned to deal with that parking issue is to remove some of those older buildings, maintain that heritage warehouse, which would provide some additional space for parking. We also realize that at the current moment, location isn't perfect, but like we said, with that waterfront redevelopment plan, we imagine that will kind of help reactivate that whole area, bring people to it, and we can take an area that, it seems to me at least, isn't utilized in its best way and help to get some more energy into that area. Also really relevant is that Gibbons has agreed to assist us with moving. That means that effectively, if we were to be moved by the end of the month, they would incur whatever expense is necessary to move our gym to the new location, which is a really big undertaking. They've got all of the machinery and the manpower to do it very quickly and efficiently. So it would be, there is, I suppose, from our vantage, a sense of urgency, if possible.
Okay. I've got one that Councillor indicated he has a question. That's Councillor Rutledge. So
Thank you, Mr.
one
Chair.
question.
What would the minimum lease time be that would make this a viable proposition, given that some of the costs with fit out?
Would you like to take that?
Well, currently we've been in our current site for 17 years, and when it was originally built it cost $270,000. So we'd really need a long-term lease.
So you're looking for 10 years or something like that?
10 years plus, yeah.
Right.
The 5 minutes is up, but I'm getting notifications that there's a number of people that are interested. I want this to be pretty brief, but I'll also proceed by saying, as I indicated to you as a member of the Sports and Recreation Committee, Council cannot make policy, cannot make decisions on the hoof. And the purpose of the forum is for you to come here and tell us what you would like. We can make any decisions on this today whatsoever.
Understood.
So I'll just take, I've got Councillor Walker and Councillor Courtney, and that's it. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification, you say in your supporting literature this morning, we have therefore invested in the purchase of some land at 78 Vanguard Street with a vision of building a new fit-for-purpose centre. So where does that fit in your plans then with Reliance? So you're going to abandon one, or?
So that document was sent to the Sport and Rec Committee, and Eric has just put that in the bundle so you can see like all the communication and what's going on. So yeah, we'd still love to be able to build that facility, but it's just out of our reach really at the moment.
I think I'm looking at your face and wondering if that answered the question properly for you.
Well, are you wanting Are you wanting to establish two?
No.
In view of you purchasing this other one?
No, that one was purchased. The previous owner of Vertical Limits bought it because he foresaw that there could be this difficulty, whether it was at that time earthquake compliance, which has since been rectified. James then went ahead and purchased it with that hope that we would be able to get something going. If we then moved into the Reliance building, that site would not be utilized for a climbing gym. That would be something that either we sell on or is held for an investment, but something completely separate from the Reliance building.
Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you to James and Erica, thank you so much for your presentation this morning and what you're trying to achieve. Your landlord, your former landlord Gibbons, they're a very community-minded company, always have been. Have they at all tried to help you and find another location?
They have suggested a few buildings to us, but in all honesty, we found that those recommendations haven't really met the specific criteria that we require. So
Well,
yeah.
They haven't come up with anything, to be honest.
Yeah.
They haven't even suggested anything. We've looked at some options, and then like current buildings that they own, and then when the push came to shove, they pulled the pin on it.
Yeah.
So we missed out on those.
Thank you. Well, Erica and James, there's a lot of sympathies for what you're doing. You're a Nelson business that we would like to see able to operate in the future, but we have to go through the proper procedures.
Thank you.
So-
We appreciate the time. We realize it was short notice, so it's really appreciated.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Item 5 on the agenda is a confirmation of the minutes. They've been circulated. They're on pages 9 to 15. Do I have someone moving to be approved true and correct record? Councillor Dalberg moved, seconded by Councillor Courtney. No corrections or alterations. I'll put it all in favour. Please say aye. Aye. Against, no. Carried. Pages 16 to 26, Forestry Advisory Group minutes. Been circulated. 2 sets of minutes there, I think, or a meeting covered over 2 days, I think. Mr Murray, do you want to make any comment to the minutes from the Forestry?
Nothing specifically. There's a number of issues in there which the committee, for want of a better term, the advisory group are dealing with, and we do have a meeting coming up in a week and a bit's time, which would be an interesting one to attend if you're interested. But happy to take questions.
So I think this is an opportunity for councillors, if they wish to. Is there anything in those minutes that they would like to ask about? This is the time to do it. Everyone's read them. All quite clear. Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you. Through you, probably to the chair or who is probably. There's been some talk about potentially being able to replant some of the blocks that we're retiring, accessing the Shane Jones Fund, but there are some challenges around that. Can you enlighten us as to where those conversations are at and where we might be able to expect them to go in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So at first blush, we didn't qualify to meet the requirements of that fund at first blush. Then we understood that perhaps Mr Jones was struggling to allocate the money because it looked a bit tough. And we have gone back to have another look, and we're expecting an update on what that new look looks like at the next meeting next week. So I don't have an update because we need to get to the committee meeting with that, but it is being investigated. Absolutely.
No further questions. Do I have a mover?
I'm happy to move, Mr Chair.
Moved by John, thank you. And seconded by Rachel?
Yes, that's fine.
Thank you. No debate. I'll put it all in favour. Please say aye. Against, no.
Aye.
Carried, thank you. We move now to the Chairperson's report. The Chairperson's report contains the results of the exercise that was carried out with councillors. It also, on page 76, has the work programme that this committee has through until the end of the term. particularly next year. Any questions on the chairperson's report? There's none. I'll move the chairperson's report. Question, Mr. Peters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In relation to the survey, the question, of course, comes as to where does this go to from now? What is there a process in place to assess it, evaluate it, and undertake some of the recommendations or indications of where some changes would be beneficial?
That's a good question. At this stage, to my knowledge, we haven't got a plan for that, but I will discuss that with them there, and we will look at where we're going. Councillor Alberg.
Just some feedback on the facilitator actually has individually rung myself and I imagine everyone else.
Yes.
And has individual discussions because it is data, it is listed self-evaluation.
Yes.
So it does relate to those that actually did that and the person has actually asked
I believe
and offered suggestions.
I believe all those that took part have had the results as they relate to them from the facilitator. Some councillors didn't take part, but not many.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
sorry to interrupt.
Okay, Rachel, fire ahead.
Just speaking to your chairperson's report and the governance evaluation document, in response to Mr. Peters' question, the report highlights opportunities for improvement and in relation to the council agendas and reports, the Chief Executive is already making some changes for improvement, and so that's a positive thing. In terms of the division between governance management, again, the Chief Executive has been working on changes to the organisational structure, and one of those was introducing a new group manager. He's got some other responses as well, and I think they'll be quite positive in terms of getting the right people in the right places and being able to also see the value from having the new staff recruited as a result of the LTP, which will mean that we've got people able to be reported to be working up through the organisation to governance rather than governance working down too low into the organisation. In terms of some of the other aspects that were highlighted, the report identified some areas for training with individual councillors, and I think from the chart you can see some areas where there might be some collective training that's worthwhile. Ms. Peters has, as Mr. Dalberg said, fed back the training, had those discussions around training with individual councillors, and I would just encourage every councillor who wished to undertake training to make contact with the Chief Executive and or myself and the governance advisors, and we'll, or manager, and we'll work our way through trying to set up some of that training. I think already we've had an opportunity that's come through for some collective training that may be able to be accessed into Nelson City by the Tasman and Nelson and Melbourne joining together, so it's a cost-effective way to deliver training. The other aspect I think that was very useful is the document is the diagram that's on which is called the polarity diagram, and I think that was actually a very useful exercise to go through in terms of understanding how we operate around the council table, where there are a wide range of views and how those wide-ranging views can be expressed in a respectful manner. So I think there was quite a lot of value from the exercise, and it's consistent with the priority in our LTP about lifting council performance.
Thank you, Mayor Rachel. Councillor Dalberg, just to follow up.
Just say one thing on that, Mr. Chair. I thought that was a very good exercise because apart from the individual component, the other councillors gave feedback as well to each individual, so that was kind of good. But also part of our vision, item 4 is really improving the outcomes from the council, governance and our efficiency. So one of those, of course, is part of the governance role ourselves. So I thought that was another plus and a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor Dalberg. Yes, as the Mayor said, each of you who took part now have a little bit more knowledge about what might be of benefit to you in terms of training, and that's been discussed, I think, individually with the facilitator, and we're now awaiting the Chief Executive and the Mayor to follow those suggestions up. They would, of course, come out of your training budgets. Now we have the Mayor, Deputy Mayor wanted to speak. He's finished. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm just referring to page 34. Which says there is, if the councillors that were unable to complete the questionnaire for a variety of reasons, it does say if more councillors, if I can paraphrase reading this paragraph, if more councillors complete the profiler with urgency, the increased numbers will assist with improving confidence and also reduce the risk of breaching the confidential nature of the exercise. And I think that relates to the fact that there weren't enough that completed it that we could actually see something, well, actually deliver something in public potentially on this report. But however, if the councillors that were unable to do so do that, I think that would give a better balance to it, and she's saying that the confidential nature would be relieved.
Okay, I agree with your comments. Where we take it from here in terms of those other councillors, I'm not sure. We'll have to think on that, and that's something that the Mayor can decide on. Are there any further questions or comments? I think I moved the chairperson's report be received. Do I have a seconder? The Deputy Chair, Councillor Dahlberg. No further discussion. All those in favour will say aye. Those against, no. Carried. Item number 8 is the Nelson Enterprise Loan Trust, and that's on page 77. And I'll invite Nikki Harrison to the table to present the report. Nikki, over to you.
Through the Chair, the Nelson Enterprise Loan Trust was due for rollover in July. I've held off putting this up because I was wanting up-to-date financial statements which are attached to the report. I'll take the report as read and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Well, councillors, you've had the report. This is an organisation that's been going since 1998 or something, I think. It has, in 1995 from memory, was it? 97, wasn't far out. And has done a lot of good in terms of small businesses in our area. And I think the report shows that it seems to have eased off a little bit. The financial return is not so good as an organisation. So the recommendation there is based on our staff's feelings about it. So I've got Councillor Courtney to ask a question and Mr Murray.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you to Officer Nikki. You're wanting a sustainable business model. It's been going for 21 years. Why have we taken this long to come to this point?
So through the Chair, I suppose, so we get copies of the financial statements every year that are provided to us as part of our loan agreement. And it's probably only in the last 2 or 3 years that, since it was last rolled, that the operating position has deteriorated. So in section 4.5 and probably, 4.3 and through to 4.5, I suppose what I'm highlighting is that they've got a bit of a funding gap in terms of grants that are required to cover their operating costs and their admin costs. So it's really only been around recently, and some of that is probably in relation to the change in status from being a charitable trust.
Thank you.
You're quite, it's good, and just another little one, you're quite sure that they'll be able to achieve that in the 12 months?
So through the chair, I mean, I have been dealing quite closely with the manager, Bruce Dyer, who you all know, and I do believe that they are really actively pursuing and looking for opportunities to become more sustainable. So they are looking at opportunities, and I believe that they will, will be working very hard on that.
Thank you. Mr. Murray?
Thank you, through the chair. Ms Harrison, I see in the appendix to the accounts on page 84, that it refers to an audit report, page 6, but that audit report isn't included with the accounts. Are you able to recall what the audit report looks like? Is it clean, or so to speak?
Through the chair, I will have to come back to you on. Oh, see. I'll have to come back to you, but from memory there was no issues in the audit report, but for some reason that hasn't pulled through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Well, councillors, I would refer you to page 86 and have a look at how the equity is sliding over the last couple of years. I think it's appropriate that we look after them for another year to see if they can turn that around. And that's what the recommendation from the staff is. Are there any further questions? Councillor Ackland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is just to sort of get my head around what's happening. I read their letter, and it's sort of the suggestion is, as I understand it, but correct me if I'm wrong, that because of their dual obligations to repay loans to the Rata Foundation and to us, they're struggling to repay the loan to the Rata Foundation, and that's why they're asking for more time to repay ours. Is that a general ballpark idea?
So through the chair, no, I mean there was probably the main, so the Rata Foundation loan has always, and that's covered in 4.3, the terms on which that was to be repaid hasn't changed, and it obviously has an interest rate of 3% on it, which does have some impact in terms of their operating position. Council aren't necessarily looking for our loan to be repaid. I suppose the main concern I have is around their ongoing business sustainability in terms of their being able to operate and cover their costs of, rent and salaries, etc.
And the risk, sorry, Mr. Chair, and so the risk we're exposed to is not repayment at all, is what you're identifying, is that right? We're not being asked to fund them again.
So through the chair, I mean, the Nelson Enterprise Loan Trust do see us as being a core funder, and that they believe that if we weren't there as a funder, that their ability to lend in the community would be constrained. But they do, when you have a look at their balance sheet, they do have quite a large amount on deposit with a bank. So it's not like it's, that their balance sheet is in a bad position. Their balance sheet is in a reasonably strong position.
Okay.
But they do see us as a core funder.
Thank you. This is an organisation that has been very valuable in our community. I think from memory, Nikki, there's only one of the loans that they make to small businesses has actually failed over the whole period of their existence, which is a pretty good record. Are you aware of that?
Through the chair, this current year there has been a bad debt, which has obviously impacted on their position. So
would that be the first?
Sorry?
Would that be the first they've ever had?
I think they've got a really high repayment rate. I think it's not completely perfect, but I think their repayment rate, from memory, and I can't remember if it's in this report or a previous one, is up sort of around the 97-98% repayment rate. But it isn't 100%. But as you'll note in the financial statements this year, there's about a 10k bad debt write-off.
Right, thanks. No further questions. Do I have someone willing to move the recommendation from the staff? It's been moved by Councillor Noonan. Yes, we'll do them both. Councillor Courtney's happy to second that. Is there any further debate?
I've got a point of order because it's just ringing in my head, but I just need some clarity around it. It's just a point of order is around the members' conflicts. Is the issue for me that sticks out is, I just need some answers, I just need some clarity on it, is the dual role of councillors in terms of Rata Foundation and council.
So what happens in that instance? Because it seems to me that there's potentially where council is funding an enterprise where there's a loan to another enterprise running at 3% interest, who members sit on that other enterprise. Isn't there a conflict there?
Well, that could conceivably be a conflict. The members involved themselves have the opportunity to consider that. I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that interests are in the hands of the person, the council themselves, that they can decide. I haven't heard anything about it, so I'm not taking it that there's any conflict of interest that will affect this meeting. So I'm looking for, has it been moved? And seconded? Yes. Yeah, Councillor Courtney. Councillor Rutledge. Speaking to the...
Yeah, I mean, Councillor Ackland's asking about my position on the Rata Foundation. From my point of view, this is an established relationship, this arrangement around the loan. Far before I was a trustee, there's no decision-making processes from Rata's position. I'm happy to take advice from the Chief Executive if he'd hold an opinion that I should step away. I've no problems with doing so, but I don't think this is something that presents any conflicts from my point.
I think it's your decision. Councillor Dalberg is a past person in the same position as you. If you wish to step back from this decision, I'm happy for you to do so. Councillor Dalberg.
Following up again with the comment from Councillor Ackland, yeah, I was on Rata. In actual fact, I was the one who initiated the paying back of loans, being part of that business model, and there's probably a bit more information that I do know about, and that's like 7 years ago. I haven't been on it for 2, so I think this isn't a conflict of interest. This is about me making the appropriate decisions for the council as part of my role as the governor. And that's really where I sit here. And yes, I do have other information, but...
I've heard from, as the chair, what the situation is. I am happy now to put this motion. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. Carried. The next item on the agenda let me get my pages right. It's on page 90, and Mr. Ball is going to present this report to us and speak to it. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. I'm happy to take the report as read. I have no updates at this time. I acknowledge the presence of the Chair of the Nelson Centre of Musical Arts Board, Roger Taylor, and the Director of the Centre, James Donaldson, and I believe they are available to assist in answering questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wall, and welcome in the gallery to Roger and James. Very happy for you to be here. Of course, it's your every right to be here. Any questions of the officer who's presented this report, Mr. Ball? Firstly, we have Mr. Murray, and then we have Mr. Peters.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you for your report, Mr. Ball. I suppose the question that shines out for me when I see these sorts of things is if we're increasing a line budget from 125 to 150 in this case, there's 25,000 sort of unbudgeted that we're now going to potentially put that way. Where does that 25 come from, or do we have a notion of, well, I'm going to take it from this one over here and give it there, or this line and give it there, or are we just adding to the operating cost per se? And if it is to the operating cost in total, do we have an opportunity to perhaps to take from one to give to the other, so to speak?
Chief Executive?
So perhaps I might have first crack at that. So this is expenditure we haven't budgeted for. We would be trying to accommodate that within our existing budgets, though that would probably be right across the organisation rather than in this particular activity, and so that it would hopefully come out of the rate surplus at the end of the financial year. But if it didn't, then effectively it's a cost that would carry forward into the next financial year. But the highest probability is it'll reduce this financial year's rate surplus.
So just supplementary question on that. What is our rate surplus so far at the moment? Just to give me a bit of perspective on, well, we've got an amount today and a wee bit later on in the agenda another amount, and I'd hate to think we're spending our surplus all up on day one.
We wouldn't even be dreaming to start trying to project a rate surplus two months into the year. That would be far further down the track. We'd start doing that round about mid-year. But Nikki may be able to help me, but typically our rate surpluses, what order have our rate surpluses been in previous years, Nikki?
So through the chair, I mean, historically our rate surpluses have been, you know, up to about $1.5 million, just depending on a number of items, and it also is really difficult at this stage because we typically would only do asset impairments and project impairments at the end of the financial year. But I mean, that's kind of the realms of our kind of average over the last sort of 5 to 10 years.
So essentially, I'm sort of getting engaged that we've got capacity to do this without sending ourselves, you know, into the black, red, whichever way, the loss situation anyway.
Sorry, I realise I nodded then and the Mayor wouldn't have seen that, so yes.
Bearing in mind that some of us, me particularly as chair of this committee, would like us to be striving to minimise our surpluses, to ensure that we maximise what we do and what we said we're going to do. So, but I believe there will be surplus available. Now, the next question is from Councillor Rutledge. Oh, Mr. Peters, sorry.
My question's been answered. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good. Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you. Two-part question. On that rate surplus, that's usually used to pay down debt, anything left over. Is that correct, or?
Through the chair, there's a set amount that's carried forward into the next financial year to reduce the rates, because obviously it's about what you've taken and from the ratepayer, but the remaining amounts are used to repay debt.
Okay, thank you. And my next question is just a bit of clarity on what this increased grant is actually for. If I'm reading it right, it seems to be because there's more community use or discounted rates being for groups using the facility. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, in summary, looking back on the earlier conversations, and I did walk those conversations back by consulting with the Mayor, Councillor Noonan, and with the representatives from the Nelson Centre for Musical Arts. My understanding is that the intention was to expand the NCMA's involvement in support for community groups and community outcomes, and we've put a bit of detail around that in a proposed grant that would be finalised subject to the decision from this meeting. But there is a little bit more detail in the attached letter from the Centre for Musical Arts. If through the chair, if you wish to have that elaborated on, I'm sure the representatives could add to it.
Okay, and to follow up, I was under the impression that community use and access was kind of part of the deal of recognising the community's really significant investment in the capital cost of the build and the additional investment that was required, as well as the existing operating grant. So was that not the case?
Through the chair, I don't believe that was not the case. I believe that the intention was the additional $25,000 was to support some additional outcomes. Through the chair, I'm happy for the representatives from the Centre for Musical Arts to clarify that if required.
Councillor Courtney.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Through you to Officer Wall. I would like some further clarity on the background. It seems to me as though it's been a breakdown in communication between, officers here and perhaps a couple of councillors, and I'd like further clarity because I really want to know where we go from this point on. I mean, if we approve this today, next year and the year after, because I think the Nelson's School of Musical Arts, or Nelson Centre for Musical Arts, would want some sort of certainty going forward. They certainly are meeting their obligations. It's just been packed week in and week out since opening. And I think, if anything, they want certainty. So it's not just a matter, I don't think, of, what do you think, approving this today? It's a matter of going forward as well, I think. They need some guidance as to what, or indications to how we're going to handle this.
Thank you. Through the Chair, I support the recommendation. I've had the opportunity to visit the centre on a number of occasions and attended the AGM last week with Councillor Fulton. My sense is that that there was an intention back when this conversation took place in February 2017 that the council should consider an LTP grant of $150,000. As explained in the report, that wasn't considered. I think there might have been an expectation that there was going to be a submission to the LTP that didn't occur, and obviously it was overlooked. So hence it's being brought forward on this occasion, and it will need to be brought back again next year as well, because we can only commit 1 year at a time in this decision to that today. But it is a recommendation that officers support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a follow-up. You see, I think the confusion has been on our side. That's where I find it difficult to just let it say, well, they've got to front up again next year. Because reading through this, I might be reading it wrong. Excuse me if I am, but I read it clearly as though the problem lies here with us in a breakdown of communication and procedure. So I really do need some reassurance or assurance from the CE even that that is the case. And if it is the case, I think we've got to put it right. It's the putting right that matters.
Chief Executive.
So I absolutely agree with the LV Martin catchphrase. It's the putting right that counts. And I thought that's what we were doing. And in the next year's annual plan, we'll be proposing the $150,000 funding, not the $125,000. But this is to get us through this year. And I think we signalled that that we, well, in 4.6, perhaps we were a bit vague on it, but certainly our intention is that we were proposing the extra $25,000 in the next two annual plans until we get to a long-term plan again. That's certainly our intention. And I thought we made it reasonably clear that it was that we were the ones that dropped the ball, which is why this report is here today.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Yeah, of course, from time to time things can happen and slips can occur, and this is the procedural one that's happened. I think it's important to look at what the 25,000 is for in section 4.1.1. All good stuff for the community that this organisation is doing. So I've got Councillor Dahlberg and Councillor Noonan.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. You did actually.
Could you just put me on your list, please, when you're ready?
Yes, of course.
That was the area I was going to. We're focusing on the NCMA, but in that 4.11, it mentions Civic Choir, the Nelson Male Voice Choir, and the Symphony Orchestra. And then I go to page 95. So really what my question is, we also provide administration services for events, marketing, and advice and leadership of these organisations, and I'd just like Mr. Ball to confirm that's what they are doing, and that's what the $25,000 is assisting with. Page 95, second paragraph from the bottom. Starts with our understanding.
Thank you. Through the Chair, yes, that is my understanding, as per the information provided by the centre.
That's a bit of confirmation I wanted, because part of what we do here is, I know we've got a fabulous building, but one of the things we want people to do is a lot of those organisations out there struggle with the administration and the governance and the other bits. And if this group is now assisting with that list, and it's a fabulous list, Nelson Civic Choir, Symphony Orchestra, Male Voice Choir, Masonic Ambassadors, etc., then if they're assisting them, because that's the bit those groups struggle with, then for the $25,000, I think it's a great investment. And if that's what happens going forward, then I'm certainly supporting that, because those groups that use that facility need that assistance to make them more efficient. And of course, we'll end up with better things in the community as well.
Thank you, Councillor Dalbeck. Got Councillor Noonan and then the Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm going to refer to 3.3, where it says it appears it was expected that NCMA would come back to Council with some further information to support the request, but it's unclear if that happened. There's an email that I sent, which isn't in this report, following up a meeting that was held here, where I confirmed that I would be looking for the 25,000. I would be looking for them to come back to us and explain what they were going to provide for that, and nothing did come back to me. But also in that email, it said that we would put the 150 into the long-term plan, and that hasn't happened. Since this report now includes the community outcomes, which is what I was looking for the extra 25,000, it now is stated in this report, I'm satisfied that that's now clear. So that may have been where there was something missing. There was an expectation. We probably both did something, missed something. So I think that's now rectified in the report. I think it's clear what is expected for that funding. So I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you, Councillor Noonan, Chair of Community Services Committee. Mayor Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Councillor Noonan summarised fairly well what had occurred there just in terms of this issue. Mr. Ball did come and ask me what was my expectation in terms of the funding for the Nelson Centre for Musical Arts for the next 10 years, and my answer was unequivocal. It was $150,000 per year for the 10 years was what should be in the plan. I think this is one of those challenges of producing a long-term plan where that change wasn't significant enough to go in the consultation document. Ms McDonald went through that in terms of what is significant for consultation, and this certainly wasn't. And I think what we're seeing is in the many thousands of lines of spreadsheets that occasionally when you have a group manager change in the middle of an LTP process, some of these things don't get perhaps the follow-up that they need in terms of making sure that response would come back from the request from Councillor Noonan, and I certainly don't expect chairs of committees to be running those sort of administrative processes. So I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that the Nelson Centre for Musical Arts is delivering community value that warrants the 150, and that was the intention when the LTP was being produced. And I think we need to sort that now. If there was a mechanism to adjust for the full 10 years, I would be wanting to do that, but I'm trying to think how we would do that. Would that be deemed to be an amendment to the LTP if we were to try and do that? And would it be such that we'd need to consult on it? It's a question really for the Chief Financial Officer or the Chief Executive.
I'm referring to the Chief Executive. I think. I'll ask you as well. See what they say.
So we hadn't considered trying to amend our LTP for $25,000. The easier option, if the council was of a mind, would be to pass a resolution basically committing the council to including it in the next 2 years' annual plans. Might be the better way of going forward.
Thank you, Mr Chief Executive. In that case, I would be very happy to do that, and but I wouldn't try and do the wording change over the phone. So if somebody else wished to do that, propose the words, I'd be very happy to move that.
Rachel,
given that was always my intention when I put forward the long-term plan.
Rachel, there is another way to handle this, and that the recommendation before us is that this be a recommendation to council, so we can, if we pass it as it is at the moment, we can then deal with it when it gets to council with a further report that would come up. Nikki MacDonald agrees with that.
Thanks, Mr Chair. That seems a very sensible way to do it, given the LTP is a council matter.
Yep, good. One final question from Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm just getting an understanding of this. We've in the past and for future offered 125,000 to contribution to the Nelson Central Music Arts or Nelson School of Music for community values, community outcomes of that value. It's increased to 150. Was that something that we decided as a council to increase our expectations, our input of that value? To me, it seems it's sort of come in a roundabout way, not
through our process, do you know?
Well, no, obviously you didn't get a chance as a council to consider that because it wasn't in the LTP. I think the logic was that significant money from a huge range of sources had been put into the NCMA building and to make sure that the community got the best return on that investment, we were increasing our funding to the NCMA. But no, you didn't get that opportunity, which is why it's here today for you to consider. And if the funding isn't provided, then the consequence is that the building won't be used as much as has been, or as we had hoped.
Thank you. So it still sort of leaves me in a position of thinking, well, we've decided as a council 125,000. We've looked at a bigger picture of LTP of a lot of different lines of finance and budgeting. This is all new to us around the table, but obviously it was the intent, desire of the chair and the mayor, but that hasn't been discussed. So it's unfortunate it's come at this stage, because when we look in the LTP, we're looking at it as a bigger picture of our total outcomes across a range of things.
Yes, your reflections are correct, but this is where we are now. We know what the 25,000 is for. It's for a very good purpose, and we're putting it right.
Well, my question for that is there an obligation? In one sense, it's a good service to provide, and it's a good organisation, and they're doing some great things. But are we obligated to? My question is: are we obligated to increase that from 125 to 150? There's a sort of pressure here that there's an obligation that we would made an error. I don't see it as so much an error. It's just it hadn't been processed through us as a council, and then we hadn't acknowledged or made a decision. I guess they were expecting, or we were expecting it from the LTP. I wasn't expecting it from the LTP discussion from Central Musical Arts, because I wasn't aware of that desire. So my question is, are we obligated?
I can tell you from the chair, no, we are not. All decisions are made around this table, and they're made on the information that we have. And there is no requirement or obligation to do anything other than what we decide around this table. A comment from the Chief Exec?
One thing I do know from talking with the chair through the as the redevelopment work went on is how tight their operating budgets are and how hard they work to find the additional funding needed to keep the school running. So there's no chance of them finding this money within their own budgets, and I think the staff have put up a report. We have said, look, this is about putting things right. So no, there is no legal obligation, but clearly, we don't put up a report like this lightly, and that's why we're recommending that this committee does support the increased funding.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm not a member of the committee, so
Happy for you to talk.
Thank you for the opportunity. Can I just pick up what was the comments from Councillor Skinner, and you're quite right in some of the comments you've made, but I, at the same time, looked at as to where the community responsibility or opportunity was a better way to look at it for people to participate in the Nelson Centre of Musical Arts. I refer you to the email which is attached. And I thank James for providing that, because it certainly made me sit up and take note that the usage of that centre is vital, not only to ensure that we're getting our value from our investment, but also to provide for a lot of these community groups who do, and if you look to see who they are, Tim, you'll see that they're actually organisations that contribute to the city at no cost.
No,
I know you're not.
The organisation just come to us this morning asking for money to do a lot of things.
Yeah, but we have, without cross-arguing, we have a bigger interest in this particular building than most. And to see these organisations having an opportunity to meet their community and their own personal aspirations, I think is rewarding for us all. And so I don't have a problem, even though I can't vote on it, I don't have a problem supporting it at council anyway. And I think the recommendation that the Mayor's endorsed us for the next 2 years gives the Nelson Centre of Musical Arts some surety. But yes, I was in a bit of a void when I first read it as to what was happening, but then James, and I think he has done it well, I don't like to speak about people in the room when they're sitting up there, but he filled that gap that had left me a little bit lost, and I applaud them for doing that, because these organisations deserve that support.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm now asking for someone to move it. Moved by Councillor Noonan, seconded by Councillor Dalbury. It's open for debate. Speaking to the motion is Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Are you speaking for or against?
Speaking for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking in support, but as you've probably picked up in my questioning, I'm not a great supporter of unbudgeted fundings be added on to. We talk a lot of these organisations. It's a great organisation, so that's why I want to make sure it's a success. And we do a lot of things for a lot of different groups and organisations. But my concern is we constantly get organisations coming to us saying they're running at a tight budget, and they are, and they're working very hard. We as a council are running at a very tight budget. We've pushed our rates, pushed our debt to limits, and this is an example. When we do that, when there's good things like this, we're already at the line, and the money's got to come from somewhere. It comes from Peter or Paul, or we're relying on a surplus at the end of the day. So it's just a flag from me that this shouldn't become a norm, that we just put money unbudgeted. We just, like I said, we just had an organisation come to us expecting money from us, because they're doing great things for the community, but they're able to resource themselves. They've been running at a tight budget, and they're a business. This is obviously an organisation which is doing a great community service. But whenever we spend more money on increasing buildings, increasing capacity, there's a knock-on effect that needs to be considered, and that wasn't considered by this council until now. So I support it, because I hate to not utilise that building, but when it comes unbudgeted, it's not an infinite unbudgeting that we can just keep moving for. So when we make these decisions in the past for LTPs, we must consider that things like this pop up unconsidered, and we need to be in a position that we can afford that, because it just puts a strain on us, strain on the ratepayer, and strain on other organisations.
The points you make are true and well made. Any further? A right of reply from Councillor Noonan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
5 minutes.
I won't take 5 minutes. I never have. I'd like to say that I'm going to support this. I understand how it happened. It's not ideal, but it has happened, and I think we need to put it right. And as Councillor Courtney said, I now see what the NCMA, I find that hard to say, sorry, still, are providing for that extra funding, and as with any contract, it will be monitored and reported back. But we will see a change come to council, I presume, from this. It can change at council along the lines with a report, so that we can see where it's going and how we're going to fund it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Newton. I'll now put it. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Yes. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now I'm going to change the order of business and bring item 11 forward, simply because we've got the two visitors in the gallery who are interested in this one as well. So do we have an officer here to present something? Michelle Joubert. You got these late papers,
Some people
Rachel?
haven't got it.
Your Worship.
If you could just identify what they are, Mr. Chair, that would be helpful.
The event funding report, have you got that? Septura residency for brass band performers?
Yes, I have. I've just got that open now. I'm ready to go.
Thank you, Michelle. Everyone's got it? Was circulated yesterday. Michelle.
Through the Chair, thank you. Yes, so this is a report requesting funding, events funding for the Septura residency. The recommended amount is $15,000.
Right. I'll open the floor for questions. I'll lead off with one. This event, is it participated in by members of the NCA? What is it called? The NCMA? Did they send out invoices for the people that come and partake in this? Is this, in other words, is this a business run within the organisation, or is it a community thing?
Through the Chair, the event is a partnership between three organisations, the Nelson Centre of Musical Arts being one of them. My understanding is that it's a residency, so advanced students in music apply to take part in this event and either travel to Nelson, or if they're from Nelson, take part. So that's how it works.
And are they charged fees to take part?
Through the Chair, I might ask one of the representatives of...
I'll be more than happy for the two visitors to join the table and just allow us to understand the situation as it is. So my question is...
Good morning. Perhaps if I could just give a very brief outline of what is involved here. This is, as has been pointed out, a partnership between the NCMA, Chamber of Music New Zealand, which is a preeminent chamber music organisation nationally running concerts throughout the country, and the University of Victoria New Zealand School of Music. The initial event was held in 2017, which involved bringing it to Nelson for a long weekend, the Juilliard School of Music Baroque Group. Now, this is Juilliard School of Music, just like it is was a preeminent international music institution based in New York, and they were touring New Zealand, and it was agreed to bring them to Nelson, bring their specialist here, and then to set up a national event where students from all over the country could apply to come to Nelson for this residency. It was at that stage it was proposed that this would be held every 2 years and varying musical activities, and the Septura is a brass residency that's been set up with national and international teachers and students being brought in from around the country for a 3-day weekend. The total revenue expectation is in fact approximately $65,000. Students do pay fees to attend. Victoria University, through two organisations with the university, are contributing funding towards the residency, and there's at least one other Wellington charitable organisation, the Adams Foundation, who also supplies. So if significant money comes from out of Nelson. The intention is to maintain and develop Nelson as a centre, as we say, of musical arts. And one way of doing this is to have residencies of this sort of a national significance. In some ways, it's a bit similar to the Adams Festival, which is occurring next year, 10 days of where people from internationally come to Nelson. So it really cements the Nelson area as a musical centre. And there are other places in New Zealand that they're attempting to take that on as well. So we have an obligation to provide accommodation and to support the students and teachers when they're here. The other institutions are supplying funding for their activities into this partnership pot. The budgeting had, as I understood it, had requested 23,000 from NRDA, and perhaps the message of the day, somehow that sort of slipped through and was never approved. So the organisation is effectively was suffering a shortfall of about $23,000. Possibility that it would have to be called off, which would have been embarrassing, if not a bit of a disaster in terms of where we were trying to get to, and where the Chamber of Music New Zealand was also trying to get to. And you may not be aware, but we did sign the Centre did sign an MOU with the New Zealand School of Music in Victoria on the basis that we would develop our association between Victoria and Nelson as far as possible in terms of teaching, etc. So the request which has come here, and I'm not sure exactly the formality of how it comes through to this group, but in discussions with Roger Ball, when this was raised with me on Friday, I said, look, we would like to get the full amount, but if it is not available, then the centre itself will take on an obligation to raise more funding to match out that $23,000, and that's the commitment that we make because we see it as so important for establishing the centre's position.
Thank you, Roger.
Yep.
James, anything you wish to add just to enable us to fully understand what's in front of us?
I think, in answer to the question, yes, this is run as an enterprise. The revenues that come in and get eventually divided up amongst the three organisations come from students. They're not going to be, there's a limit to what we can charge those people, but they will bring a lot of investment with them, both in terms of audiences and in terms of their own investment here when they come to Nelson. That won't end up in our coffers, but so we definitely endeavour to try to recover costs from the students, but we'd love to, we need really further investment in order to make this happen, in order to bring these people here.
Thank you. Now, I'm happy for you to stay at the table and take questions direct, because this is an item that's come on to us late and we need to be able to understand it fully. So I've got Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just querying the parameters around our events fund, and I guess quite conscious that we've had a report recently that says we're overextended in that space for the next couple of years. So I guess this would further exacerbate that overdraft situation. But I guess what the events fund is designed to drive commercial activity and have certain ROIs. And this one, it would appear last time had a 3-to-1 ROI. If we put $15,000 in, it might have a 4-to-1. But our criteria for that fund is if I remember, 10-to-1. So is that correct? And I guess on the basis of that, why is this coming through as being recommended?
I'm going to ask Nikki McDonald to.
Yes, through the chair, I can offer some commentary on that, as I was the council representative at the Events Development Committee when this was considered. You'll note that it wasn't on the list of forward commitments or expectations that was on the previous report that came, and yet, at the time the 2017 funding was agreed, there was discussion about the fact that there could perhaps be a 3-year funding. It's a biennial event, but every second year on a reducing basis with a view to the event becoming self-sustaining over time. No commitment was made, but it was certainly known. And the reason it wasn't on the forward commitments apparently is that NRDA felt that perhaps this could come out of the Community Events Fund at this stage. Now, as the council's representative at that meeting, I didn't feel it actually fitted the criteria for community with so many of the participants coming from outside. That focus seemed to me it was absolutely right that it had come from the economic side originally and should still, so I wasn't able to support it. There was discussion about the return on investment, and by NRDA calculations it was actually a 5-to-1 return, and they talked about the expected return to the economy in Nelson this time and said that if they invested 10,000 they felt it would be in the right range for the Economic Events Fund, but that it, because it was fully committed, there wasn't that possibility because they weren't prepared to remove any of the existing expected events from the list for this one. So my concern was that this was regarded by everyone at that committee as a very high quality event that was very well run in 2017 and had a lot of potential for the Centre of Musical Arts to develop in the future. So I came back and talked to the Mayor and suggested that it might be good to bring a paper to this committee so that council consider whether, for wider reasons of wanting to support that investment we've made in the centre and allowing them to develop this event, that there could be a decision to take this from council funding rather than the events fund, which is fully committed.
Thank you. Okay, so just to get clarification on that, so this is not coming from the events fund, this is an unbudgeted...
Another unbudgeted.
Right, okay, understood.
Mr. Peters?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One point of clarification and one point to make, if I may. Just a point of clarification. Item 5.6 refers to 2017 council contributing 20,000. Was that a council grant in the same way as we're talking about now, or was that an RDA, a Regional Development Agency fund?
Through the chair, that was funded through the Events Fund in 2017, so it's not the same as today's request.
Thank you. The second one, Mr. Chairman, just as Chairman of Audit, Risk and Finance, just to remind members that one of the key risks that this organisation decided it needed to face it, or be aware of at all time, was reputational damage to the organisation. It appears from the comments made that there is, Nelson has and is developing a reputation for these kind of events taking place. And if we're unable to support this, I just want people to recognise that there will probably be, in that field, some risk of reputational exposure.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Councillor Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who is Septura? Is that a fancy name for the month that it's held, or is it an organisation?
They're actually a touring performing ensemble based in London. They're acknowledged as world leaders in brass instrument performance. They will attract a great deal of interest from brass players around New Zealand and quite possibly Australia and further afield. We're very honoured to have them join us.
And a further question, how many participants are you likely to have?
Can I come back to you on that? I'll find out exactly what the student numbers are that they're expecting to enrol. There's obviously a little bit of crystal ball gazing at the moment. At this point, where enrolments are not yet on the table. So,
I just wondered, perhaps based on the previous event, you know, how many participated then? No idea? Okay.
Unfortunately, I was overseas at the time. There were significant numbers. They also, the Juilliard group also played a concert in Nelson, stayed over the weekend, and then went to Wellington the following day. So there was a significant number of people coming along with administrators as well.
I've just been advised, Councillor Walker, that last time there were 40. 40.
Okay, thank you. It's just that I'm a bit of a fan of user pays, and I know that Mr Taylor has said that they have an obligation to fund this event and organise it. I'm not sure that council has an obligation, even though I did at college pay the trombone. So I just feel that where does it all stop? And I don't know, have you pursued possibility of sponsorship? I mean, we're only talking of 15,000, I know, but I'm just a little bit uncomfortable.
I don't know if that's a question. You can comment if you wish, James.
Yes, we've taken on an obligation to go and find probably about $5,000 worth of sponsorship from local organisations national organisations who supply brass instruments. We believe that's quite manageable, but Roger spoke about a $23,000 shortfall in the enterprise. We'd still need some assistance to make this, to be able to push play.
Thank you very much. Councillor Courtney has a question.
Yes, I did. Thank you, James, for that, because that really answered my question there. But I don't think we can level criticism, can we, at the NRDA and the Events Fund, because from the explanation through you, Mr Chair, to Officer Nicky, you didn't support this proposal at the NRDA, so it's not a matter of the Events Fund not having enough money to support this, is it?
Through the Chair, sorry if I wasn't clear, yes, I did support it, but there was no funding available from the economic events side. I did not support it coming from community events funding.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just so I've got this right, this is a 4-day workshop, or it's got 4-day here. 4 days. Residential workshop or academy for music students. Now this money, this is to just help accommodate those students who are coming to attend this learnings, or is it to pay for Septura Brass Septet to come here from the UK?
It's part of the total package. The students do pay. There are costs associated with the administrators coming, a payment to Septura, and to the cost of the centre itself in terms of accommodating the music at the centre, and we have costs associated with staffing and other things. So it's all part of a package, and then yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Rutledge. Followed by Mr Peters.
Oh, I think we're asking the same question. We've just been talking about it. So, is there a concert associated with this?
Yes, there is at least one. At least there will be one major concert and probably several small events associated with that are available to our community, and will, I think, be of interest to people from further afield.
And you're selling, so that's ticketed events that you'll generate revenue from. Okay.
Thank you. I think that pretty much exhausts the questions. If this goes through...
Chair, would I be able to ask a question?
Yes, of course, Rachel.
Thank you.
You didn't catch my eye.
No, that's all right. Just a question for Roger and James. I'm looking at the Septura connection to the UK, and I know that this is something, Roger, that you've been wanting to work on, and how we build these international connections with the Nelson Centre for Musical Arts. Do you see this as one of those key international connections that could develop over time to be perhaps build a international relationship between for music in Nelson with perhaps through this event? I know there are a few others that you've considered with symphony orchestras, but I'm wondering if this is another one that you see has that potential.
Yes, it is, and it goes back to Juilliard as well. And I think there's just one other aspect. it also broadens the scope that the school is involved in. I mean, traditionally, the school's been thought of as an elitist classical string quartet type institution. To actually run a brass section here, I think broadens out the public perception of the school and our involvement. And the Juilliard was Baroque music, which is not usually heard, and I'm sure there will be other activities in future years. So it's a matter of really showing the world that we are more than just a narrow-based institution. We are a centre of musical arts.
Thank you. I've just got one more question, Mr. Chair. Just for Michelle, in terms of the previous funding, or maybe from Nikki, you said it came from the events fund, but I'm conscious that the events fund was having to fulfil two functions for the last couple of years because it was funding community events. So we went through the transition process to for the events fund to go across to NRDA in full. Do you know whether it was funded through the community element of the events fund that they did hold at that time, or purely through the economic fund?
Yes, through the chair, I did check that point, and it was purely funded through the economic of the events fund.
Well, then I just need to understand a little bit better why this time, and I may have misunderstood that, the assessment was that it didn't fit the economic fund, or was it simply that there wasn't enough money in there?
Through the chair, no, the assessment was that it did fit with the economic events fund, but it was simply completely committed, and that was why there was a suggestion it might come from community, and I felt that it did not fit the community side of the events fund.
No, thank you. I just needed that clarification. I think you made the right assessment there too. It probably sits somewhere in between, but certainly not within our community events criteria. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Rachel. Councillor Ackland.
I was going to ask the same question as a joke. No, I just want to ask a question through you, Mr. Chair. Is essentially, I think it seems pretty clear to me the idea here also is to grow this as a event, and that only comes with probably running several of them, so it becomes a bit of a mainstay in people's minds who are in this field. Is that correct?
Absolutely, we're really looking forward to growing this. Nelson has had for some years now a real reputation in the circles, both nationally and to some extent internationally, for being a centre of excellence in performance music. We'd like to grow that, as Roger said, both in terms of scope and simply grow the reputation. We'd like to do a lot more of this if we can. We think it's a really valuable investment in.
Just on that, supplementary through you, Mr. Chair, is just, and what's the feedback been between events? I mean, have you seen the seeds of that starting to germinate, and that people are seeing it and recognising it as potentially something that they can look forward to on a calendar on a biennial basis?
Absolutely. Roger.
I'll give you one example. The Adams Festival, which will be held next year, the end of January, has a arrangement whereby people can buy tickets for the whole week, about $950, I think, per trip. They went on sale on the 1st of September, and within an hour, 80 seats had been sold. The total availability of those seats, because they involve a tour up to the lake for a concert, sold out within an hour. In fact, the biggest concern was that they sold out too quickly and people would start complaining. There are another group of seats, but that group of concerts, I think there's about 19 concerts that people can go to, will virtually be a sellout of 300. They had, I'm actually involved with the Adams Festival as well, but they had people ringing up from Australia wanting to make sure that their tickets request had been dealt with in that hour, because they were worried that they'd miss out on. So it has, and reports have come through the council, it has international payoff. So I would think of those 80, probably 60 or 70 of them were from out of Nelson. So yes, the message is out there. There's absolutely no question about this, and this is really what we're trying to build on.
Sorry, but that's Adams Festival, and you see the same thing potentially happening with this as well, do you? Okay, great.
You would need to have more concerts than just the one if you were going to do the same. Would I be right?
I think it's probably even bigger. We need to do more things like this. This is a one weekend event. We only have a limited audience pool here in Nelson. But the more we do of these events, the more people will come to expect it of us, and the more people will enjoy our fabulous facilities and city. I can see it being quite a strength moving forward.
I hope you communicate with all those Adams Festival goers and let them be aware that this is on as well. I've got another question from Councillor Dahlberg.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. Probably the staff, really. The thing that keeps coming up here is the funding from our events, Regional Development Agency funding. My concern there is how many more of these unbudgeted or things that are very needy in the community are we going to have in the next year, if not 3 years? Because that's the challenge here. Are we setting a precedent, or do we just go back and bite the bullet and put the funding back to where it should be? Because this should be coming to the Regional Development Agency, because that's what this is. So my question to the staff is, how many more do they expect of these requests for unbudgeted funding come up in the next year, if not 3 years?
Ms. McDonald.
Yes. Through the Chair, this was, as I said, unexpected because some assumptions had been made about how it could be funded. The Regional Development Agency believes it has a good handle on what events are coming up and what requests it's likely to receive, and it has a plan for how to cover those. But there's no way to tell whether something else might come out that they're not prepared for. So, and I think that though would be over 2 years. It's 2 years before they get any headroom rather than 3.
Thank you. I think that completes the questions. Roger and James, I'll ask you now to go back to the gallery.
I'll move that to receive.
Thank you for your involvement today. All right, we're dealing with the first part, that the report be received. They've been moved by Councillor Skinner, as a seconder, Councillor Courtney. Is there any debate on this one? There is not.
I'll debate, but we haven't moved the recommendation.
To your motion?
I was just moving that we receive the report. I haven't moved it. We receive the recommendation, but
I know that.
Yeah, I'll debate this one. No, I don't.
Debating the receipt of the report.
Sorry?
Are you debating the receipt?
No, you asked for a debate.
No, you're not debating the receipt of the report. No, right.
I wouldn't have put it. I wouldn't.
There is no debate. All in favour? Who was the seconder? Councillor Courtney. All in favour, please say aye. Against, no. Carried. Right now, I am looking for someone to move a recommendation to council. It's been moved by Councillor Ackland, supporting of the local staff, and Councillor Courtney again as the seconder. Any discussion? Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. No, I don't support this recommendation. Today, I feel like we need an FPOS machine, a ratepayers council FPOS machine at the door. It's great that we have these events and they provide people coming to Nelson and they spend in Nelson. We are in the business of providing facilities and facilitating events to come here. We're not in the business of paying for teachers or students to attend workshops or academies. If so, I think we'd get a lot of different groups and organisations and clubs asking us, can you pay for our students, our kids, our adults, teachers to come here and learn. This is a privilege for some advanced musicians to learn to advance their trade and academy. This is an opportunity to bring over some teachers from the UK for that, but I don't see that as our responsibility for this. This in the past has been through the events fund. This hasn't passed through the events fund or been accepted for the events fund or NRDA. As pointed out earlier, we've already extended beyond what we'd budgeted for that. This is just putting more pressure on that. So as much as it's a great event, this is setting a precedent for us as council to be a bit of an FPOS machine to fund every good event or every good student who wants to come here to learn. If we're trying to cultivate an area of excellence for music and arts, and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the School of Music. I was a student there for 5 years learning the clarinet, plus other instruments as a youth. But I wouldn't expect someone to pay for me to attend, and I'd expect us as a council to help contribute for a building, a facility. But no, this is an academy, this is a user pays, this is setting a precedent I don't want to start.
Thank you. Any other speakers? I've got Councillor Courtney, the seconder of the motion. Yes.
Very happy to support this. It didn't meet the criteria, I understand. Hopefully, I understand it. The Economic Fund nor the Community Fund. It really didn't fit in either of those. Is that? Yes, please.
If you have another question, yes.
Through the chair, it fitted the economic criteria. There was no money available.
Aha. I see. Yes, well, that's different, isn't it? Yes. I just want to say that we support so many activities in this city to bring vibrancy to it and to enjoyment to our people. And this facility is being so well supported. The Nelson Centre for Musical Arts is one of the 4 pillars of this community. It's bringing music. Music that warms the heart, fills the ear, and it's such a joy to have it back. And here they are trying to build it and to have it flourish. When I see us supporting other activities, other sporting events and so forth, it does irk a little bit that we're here possibly dragging our feet on this one. I don't think we should. I think we should support it. The goodwill from the community is there now for that pillar of our community. We've got 4 pillars. We've got the School of Music, the Nelson Centre for Musical Arts. We've got the Suter Art Gallery. We've got the museum. We've got the Theatre Royal. The 4 pillars are there in place now. They've all been strengthened at different times. And I think we have an obligation to make the small contribution to this event, which is going to be a biannual event. And I can recall doing it for other events as well, whether it be netball, basketball, mountain biking, all sorts of events, one-off events that may have some ongoing benefits to the community, and I think this is another one of those. So I'm very happy to second it.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Courtney. Mover, do you wish to speak? Or, yeah, right.
Well, I can be brief because essentially I wholly endorse Councillor Courtney's remarks. I mean, I think he's covered it all off entirely. I think it's quite right. I think in these sort of situations it can be. I sympathise with Councillor Skinner's position because it can be sort of easy to think, oh, hang on, we are being treated like a cash machine. It can feel like that. But what's convinced me on this one particularly is it would otherwise meet the criteria for economic funding, and also there is a strong argument and sentiment around from the submitters on, from the relevant organisation on the likelihood of it becoming a branding exercise and part of our culture. And Nelson is bigger than $15,000 in fact. So I'm more than happy to support it for all the reasons that Councillor Courtney has given, and we're voting yes.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Rutledge. Do you wish to speak for or against?
I'm speaking against.
No, I asked you, and I didn't get an indication.
So I'm speaking against on this one, and it's no slight on the quality of the event. It does look like a really good event that would be really nice to have in the city. It clearly is the sort of event that would fit within our events, our commercial events fund criteria. However, it probably wouldn't get across the line at a 4-to-1 ROI. We have gone through quite a process with setting up that fund. We set the criteria for it. The target is a 10-to-1 ROI. We have made decisions about what events that would come out of that fund and the total value of it, and the fact that those are now we've committed, we've spent our money, actually means you have to live with the consequences to those decisions, and here is one today. So I don't, on that basis, I'm not able to support this today.
Thank you, Councillor Dalberg. Councillor Rutledge, Councillor Dalberg. Speaking for or against? I've had 2 speakers for and 1 against so far. Or 2 against. 2 for and 2 against.
I'm probably sort of caught in both camps actually, but I'm actually for the concept of developing it rather being a string event down at, or orchestra event at the School of Musical, in my mind. And we do have a great brass system around Nelson, and I'm kind of liking the idea that that gets taken to that next level. My challenge here really is from the document on page 2. It says here approved funding. It doesn't say unbudgeted. So it's going to come from somewhere in a budget. So it hasn't got unbudgeted. So someone else is going to miss out a 15K. But my real comment goes back to this went to the economic events budget, the events fund, and it ran out of money. And we can tinker with these little ones, and this is a great example because it pulls on your heartstrings, and we have, this is a lovely thing to have coming to town from my point of view, inspiring young people to do stuff, and older people to enjoy it. But my question is, until we solve where the events fund's at, we're going to end up playing with this, not now, for the next year. So if this does go up to the council, I'd like some comment in there about what we do about addressing the fact that the events fund is going to say no to a lot of people, and they're going to come through this back door to get to it. So if this does go up to council, it needs either it's unbudgeted or it's not in that recommendation. And secondly, it needs something in there to address the fact that the events fund has got no money in it. And that's why this came here.
Just for clarification, early on in the handling of this item, Mr. Chief Executive, you indicated this was unbudgeted. Would be coming from unbudgeted money to be treated the same as the earlier one? Mm-hmm. Yep. So it's in the report, it says that it's unbudgeted. Yeah. Yes.
It's not a recommendation, so that's what you're going to move through to the council. It needs to go to
I think to be consistent as we did that in the other one, we should do it in this one as well. So, mover and second, happy to include that?
Yeah, that's fine. That's just for clarity.
Mm-hmm. Clarity?
Yeah. I'm confused because I thought, I've just been listening to Councillor Rutledge's debate, and I might be confused about missing the wrong points about funds and meeting criteria, but I thought I heard Officer advice it did meet criteria, but Councillor Rutledge is saying it doesn't meet criteria. So
maybe you can clarify that.
Yes, through the Chair, the Events Fund Guidelines, as they're called, says that the economic component of the Events Fund as a whole will meet the 10-to-1 return. But when the strategy was presented, NRDA did point out that there will be overs and unders. So it is not that every single event needs to meet a 10-to-1. There will some that will do much better and some they will still support that might do less. But overall, they want to return at least a 10-to-1. So not every event needs to meet that.
So just for the abundance of caution and be absolutely clear, it does, the advice is it did meet criteria for that fund, but the fund was already committed, which is why it wasn't supported by that fund.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Mayor Rachel, would you like to have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad that clarification has been made because the application did get across the line at the events fund. I think, Councillor, and I do support this, I think one of the things that we've got to recognise is that we actually have a new venue, and what we know is as we bring new venues into the community that we need to consider not just the capital expenditure but also the operational expenditure that allows us to deliver the value back from the capital investment. We've seen that situation with the increase in operational funding decision that you've recommended through to Council earlier today. What we're also seeing is that as we develop the Nelson Centre for Musical Arts, and I need to clarify if it's of musical arts, I'm still not clear in my head. My apologies to Roger if I've got that wrong. But as we bring this forward, we look at new opportunities. It would be a terrible thing to stay static as a community, to have invested a significant amount of public money, both from philanthropy, from government, from local government, and to stay exactly in the same place. So here we are with an opportunity to build an event with international recognition and connections, and we're being asked to contribute $10,000 to a facility that is where we've already committed more than $3 million, significantly more than $3 million. I find that this investment highly sensible. Had we had the information about the events fund and the financial position around that as we were bringing forward the LTP, then I can tell you as Mayor, I would have seriously considered whether we needed to look at a transitional amount of funding to deal with the next few years to ensure that we weren't having to have these reports coming up to Council. And I endorse Councillor Dahlberg's comments in that regard, that we need to consider whether, in light of the fact that we didn't have full information at the LTP sign-off, whether we want to do perhaps not a large amount, but a small bulk amount that can be held in reserve for the Events Fund Committee to be able to access if they find they have something like this again. Because from an efficiency point of view, to be perfectly honest, the exercise of bringing this report forward today, the time involved in doing it has probably cost $5,000, and that's not good efficient council practice. So I'll just leave that with the Chief Executive and the Group Manager to consider as to whether we can improve our efficiency on this in light of the information that we now have to hand. But I'm thoroughly in support of this, and thank Roger and James for their initiative in bringing forward this event.
Thank you, Rachel. Mayor Rachel. Mr. Murray, you wish to have us?
Yes, thank you, through the Chair.
Just before you do, Mr. Murray, just Rachel, for your information, the amount is not $10,000, it's $15,000.
Oh, my apologies, 15.
Just to make everybody quite clear on that. Mr. Murray.
Thank you, through the Chair. Yes, look, this is a difficult decision because it does have some downsides, and I fully support what Councillor Skinner is saying about feeling like an EFTPOS machine today and spending unbudgeted stuff. I'd like to see where that's coming from as opposed to the rate surplus. And then I can also see the value of this event in the community. So, you know, it's a real yin-yang for me. But I'm going to vote for it because, quite frankly, the risk of reputational damage to council, as Mr. Peters has pointed out and is in the papers, is moderate to high in this one. And I think on that balance, that would push me into saying yes, we should be supporting this. So I just wanted to indicate where I sat with that. It is a difficult one, and I think that events funding does need to be sorted. I haven't been through the overspend with the NRDA, so I don't quite fully understand that, but I see why this is here, and I think this is a worthwhile one on the balance, and it is balanced.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I'm going to draw the debate to a close. We've had we have had 5 people speaking for, so I'm going to put it in the agenda.
Division for that. Thank you.
Can't you?
Mr. Chair, can we actually say what the recommendation is?
Yes. We're adding the words budgeted. We can put it up, please. Yep. We'll wait for that. While we're waiting, can I just commend particularly to Councillor Walker, but everyone, that there is a brass band concert on tonight at the NCMA. I think it'll be a great concert. I'm going. Go along and support your locals. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Just a member of the public who wants to go along and represent the mayor, actually.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that.
Thank you. We're just waiting for this to come up on the screen, Rachel. With the amendment, which is going to include that this money is unbudgeted, so it's quite clear in our records where everything is happening. The mover and the seconder, Councillor Ackland, Councillor Courtney, you'll both confirm your happiness with that? Thank you. Right, we've had a division called.
Right.
Conducting division. Thank you.
Councillor Ackland?
Aye.
Councillor Courtney?
Aye.
Councillor Dalberg?
Aye.
John Murray?
Aye.
Councillor Noonan? John Peters?
Aye.
The Mayor?
Aye.
Councillor Rutledge? Councillor Skinner?
No.
Councillor Walker?
Aye.
Councillor Barker?
Aye. We can declare it carried 8-3. Thank you. We move back now to item number 10, I think it is. Well, yes, it is. It's past 10:30. It's about the time for a break for a cup of tea, I think. We'll adjourn for a short break. Good suggestion.
Thank you.
So now we are dealing with item number 10, which is on pages 97 to 134. And Nikki Harrison will do the presentation of the report. On behalf of Claire Barton.
Thank you. Thank you. Through the chair, I have no updates to this report and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nikki. Well, the report is pretty much a procedural one for us. It has the details that went through to the government from the NRDA, the Tasman District Council and LG&Z. I suppose my question would be, how come we didn't actually get an opportunity to be involved at the submission stage? Who can ask that? Mr. Chief Exec?
No, I don't know, I'm sorry.
So we didn't. Councillor Matheson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and a very, very good question that you've just asked, because there is a subtle difference, just subtle, between the TDC stand and ours. And in reading the report, they want a greater say of the levy, and we seem to have been satisfied to take a 50-50 split. It would have been good to be able to discuss that issue. I understand entirely that the TDC have a huge catchment area of conservation land, which they have to manage directly, indirectly, and so there are additional costs. But we also have other issues here with some of our infrastructure, which is becoming old and overcrowded, and I'm talking especially about restrooms and so forth. So that is a good question, and it's too late now, but it's not good, I think, when you get to tourism, which has no boundaries between the two districts, that we have two different thinkings on where this levy should be given. So a little disappointing in that respect. Otherwise, the rest of it that I read, I found fine.
Thank you, Councillor Matheson. Questions, or are you speaking to it?
No, same
Still some
vein,
questions?
Yes, same vein really, in that how can we collect up what things we should be submitting on? Is there a mechanism that's not there? Because we obviously didn't pick up on the fact that we could have submitted on this and we haven't. So is there a mechanism where we can pick those up in the future?
Chief Exec.
So, sorry, now that I've scanned the report again. So our expectation has been that the NRDA is the council's front face for economic development and tourism. That's what we fund them for. So we expect them to put in that submission. We don't have the resources or the skills on board at the moment to do that sort of work. We would have had to probably contract somebody. Whereas in actual fact, we pay the NRDA as a standalone organisation to do that. So that's why it wasn't brought to one of the committees of council as a submission from staff.
Follow questions?
Just as a follow-up then, is there a mechanism whereby the draft submission could come to a committee or at least a chair for an overview or a commentary?
It would be unusual to have that sort of oversight over a CCO. We set them up with their own board and their own governance structure. If we start to do that, then we're starting to bring them back in house, which was not the intention.
Councillor Noonan, have you completed your questions?
I'm not sure actually. It's a good question, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to think that we've got some input really into some of these submissions if we've got a different view.
I'll ask Her Worship the Mayor, have you got any comment or question, Mayor Rees?
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. I'm somewhat loath to speak at cross purposes for Chief Executive as we haven't had an opportunity to have this discussion, I think this actually highlights one of the issues around purposes of entities. And without going to look at the SOI for NRDA, I'm not sure that its remit covers providing submissions to government on behalf of Nelson City Council. I think that, and I'm not sure how comfortable I would be with that, given that its purpose is somewhat different to the purposes of council, and I think council still has a role to submit, given our broader role in relation to community outcomes, far more than economic development. And I see this as a matter that does cover all of the well-beings, which will hopefully be inserted back in the Act reasonably soon. You may not have the same view, Mr Chair. So look, I think Councillor Noonan highlights a good point here as to actually how are we approaching our submissions to government and government entities. And I think we might just need to spend a little bit of time with perhaps with Ms McDonald and the Chief Executive just sorting it through. In relation to the content of these, the submission in front of us today, I'm just not in a position to offer a view on where Nelson City Council should stand. I do find that most government agencies, or through submissions processes, and in relation to councils, they are reasonably comfortable with us putting in late submissions. And I just, that point may have passed, so I just asked for some commentary from perhaps Ms McDonald, and then the committee might like to consider whether they felt that they wished to put in a late submission, if that was possible.
Ms McDonald?
Yes, through the chair. Yes, what we would normally try to do is put in a submission within the period on a pro forma basis and say there might be amendments later, so at least that they had received something. But it's on a case-by-case basis, and we can approach and see if it's possible to put in a late submission.
Well, thank you, Ms McDonald. Mr Chair, I do actually think this is, given the value of tourism to our region, and picking up the Deputy Mayor's comments, we are under some pressure in terms of our facilities when it comes to tourism, and with the tourism strategy that we've got in terms of growing tourism numbers, I don't see that getting any easier. I'd also just highlight, as we start to attract more major events, we need to consider the impact not only international visitors have in our region, but also domestic visitors. And I know this one focuses on international visitors, but I do think we just need to start being mindful of as we scale up, and we seem to be becoming quite successful at doing that, and that's a good thing. We just need to think about how we fund some of those pressures on our facilities.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mr Peters.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Just following up on and understanding the Chief Executive's comment about us having NRDA there in that space, if you like, for us. Aren't I right in thinking that NRDA also has a remit for TDC, albeit on a different financial basis, but they undertake work for TDC in the regional development area, including those spaces? And if that's the case, should there be any concern that we obviously see that both TDC and NCC see that organisation in a different light to each other in terms of where their scope starts and finishes? And is there any advantage in trying to make sure there is some degree of consistency between those approaches? Because we run the risk otherwise of, as we've got now, an inconsistency in a submission where perhaps the world or the rest of the country would look at us and think that that would be a very united approach as to how we handle tourism in a high tourism area collectively.
Chief Executive, can you comment?
So yes, there is a different approach to the NRDA. It's a council-controlled organisation wholly owned by the Nelson City Council. Tasman District Council are going to have a relationship with the NRDA, but that'll be a direct contractual relationship, purchasing services from that organisation. So they consider them as a contractor that'll provide some specific services with some specific outcomes. So it is a different relationship. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Councillor Dahlberg, followed by Councillor Ackland, followed by Councillor Courtney.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm in line with Mayor Rees here on tourism being, massive to our area. And also that whole thing about the top of the south impact working together. The fact that we aren't putting a submission kind of looks like we're not taking it serious. That's my comment I need to make. The fact that the Nelson Regional Development Agency has put one in, and there's some very good points on that. So I would have thought that we should be able to put up some sort of submission, albeit late. And the great points are like a few major ones in there. Should the Australians be considered? Well, obviously, why not? They're the biggest tourism coming here. Is it going to be 25 or 35? Well, it's going to be $10. You've got to be kidding. 2 cups of coffee, that's an easy one. And then the other one's funding made to the regional authorities based on proportional visitor spend. And then there's a comment in there about motel nights, some little tricky things like that, but which I know would take a bit of time. But probably the question after all that is really to the staff is, can we manage to get a late submission in, or have we been locked out of that process?
Through the chair, we would just have to approach government and find that out so we can make the request.
Cool. I do note there's one from the local government New Zealand as well, which is useful because again we are part of that group. But I would like to think we are an individual group. We're supposed to be an important component of the top of the south. I like the idea we're actually working together to get government to look at us, whether it's roading or this and tourism. And I would like to think that we are up for putting a submission in.
If that's the will of the committee, of course we can, but we'll probably have to contract someone in to do that work. We don't have any in-house tourism expertise or anyone that I can just lightly turn to this piece of work.
Councillor Ackland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it appears to me that the discussion happening now isn't necessarily before us, because we're just asking to report this up to council rather than, well, I suppose it could be an amendment to go and do some work for the governance body. My question is really around how that would work. Say that was to happen, how would that work? Would that have to come back to another governance meeting to then sign off on a submission that's made by a contractor, which we all then agree to? Then it would be possibly amended and come back to a further meeting of council and then, or of the committee, and then it would then be signed off by the committee, and then it would go to council for sign off, and then it would go from council to central government. Is that how it would work?
I would like to think there'll be one less around than that, but I don't know who has the delegation to put submissions to government. Is that the council or is this committee? Do we know? But certainly I would expect that if it's coming back to this committee, either we're going to have to schedule an extraordinary meeting of this governance committee to look at that and then hope that there weren't too many changes, because if there were, I would have to go and rewrite it again. And then if the governance committee doesn't have the delegation, then it would be a recommendation to council. So it could take, and that's the problem with a lot of these submissions, is unless it lines up with our meeting cycle, it can be very hard to get them turned around and get them to a committee before the close of play, which is why Nikki talks about sometimes we put up a pro forma.
So it's sort of months, presumably. A couple of months.
It could be, depending on how the meetings fell and the process. It could be another 6 weeks. Yes.
And then, and then in terms of cost, could you give us any steer on sort of what it would cost to get a consultant? Probably not today.
I don't think it'd be a big piece of work, no, but no, I don't know. I wouldn't be keen to hazard a guess.
So we need, just to be clear on the process again, because I think what I'm trying to just get out is I don't necessarily think that there needs to be a submission from this council, given that our council-controlled organisation, just so we're clear on where I'm sitting with this, given that it's our CCO, and I haven't heard yet, although I'm open to hear, what our submission would be any different to what the position that's been presented in the NRDA submission. It seems a good one to me when I've read through it briefly. Nor would it be inconsistent with local government New Zealand's position. And indeed, I worry that if they're inconsistent with those two things, what does that look like? But more so, how will we actually get this to work? And is it all pointless given that submissions have closed, which is fine, except that wouldn't we then have to consider as a committee the cost of doing this work? So we'd have to have firstly, we'd have to have a new agenda item come back with the proposed cost of doing this work, which is unbudgeted expenditure, or perhaps you've got the delegation, Mr. Chief Executive, but I would have thought that might have to come back in the first place.
I think if I can come in here and assist, I'm advised that this committee has the delegated power to approve it. If we are largely supportive of the NRDA and the LGNZ submission, we could do a late submission in support of those, and if there are any points that we wish to add to them, they could be put in our submission. So I don't see a submission from this council as being a huge task. The bulk of the work has been done in the submissions that have already gone. And largely, I think, engaging around the table, we're pretty much in support of them. We all appreciate that the central government takes all the funding. It takes all the money that comes through from GST and all the other taxes. At last, even though it is another tax, this is an opportunity for local government to actually get something to be able to provide the services that are expected now by the tourists that come to our country. So in terms of the procedure, I think we can handle this much more simply.
Okay, I'd like to see it, Mr. Chair, thank you, that procedure. And just finally, my question is really what weight would any of submission from us really have in those circumstances? Because given those submissions have gone in, does really putting our stamp and our name to it actually change any government official's mind or MP's mind? So in my view, come on, let's just move on and slightly get over ourselves that we missed an opportunity to put in a submission, but that's okay. We agree with the submissions that have been made.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I go on the speaking order again, please?
Yeah, Rachel, sure. You can come in now.
Thank you. Look, I have to express to through you, Mr. Chair, that Nelson City Council's voice does matter in relation to engaging with central government, and this government has made it very clear that it wishes to partner with local government and wants to work together. Every opportunity that's available to do that, we need to be making sure that we are there. We need to be speaking as Te Ihu as much as we can. So I think there's a bit of corralling of the horses here needed to see where Marlborough District Council is sitting, Tasman District and Nelson City, and see if we can actually have a common voice as we speak to MB. And I think there's time to do that. I think it is important that we build relationships, and relationships with MB are critically important. You need to consider where a significant amount of funding is sitting in terms of the Provincial Growth Fund and how that's administered. And tourism is going to be part of our profile for accessing that Provincial Growth Fund. So don't underestimate how these small things actually, when layered up, make a difference. And I would strongly encourage the committee to put in the pro forma, if necessary, to allow some conversations to occur. It's actually through sitting around the table and having the face-to-face over a cup of tea that you make progress on these things locally and both again when we go to central government. It's not rocket science. It's actually just good communication and relationship building. I would say that I do find it difficult when we get reports out that don't have the attachment, the attachment at the back that tells me where the delegations lie. So I haven't got the paper that says important considerations for decision making as far as I can see in relation to this paper. So I'm unclear why this matter is being referred up to council. So to deal with all that annoying, all those matters that just seem far too annoying in terms of backwards and forwards for committee, could we please get clarity on where the delegation lies? I would have thought it sat with the governance committee, so I'd like to understand why Ms. Barton's recommending it goes to council.
We've just checked again, Rachel. The delegation lies with the governance committee.
Thank you. In that case, I think the Governance Committee's perfectly in the position to get on and deal with this, Mr Chair, in the way that we normally do, where you'll delegate a couple of people to go and sort out a submission. And you may even be able to, and you can pop it in late, and then if the committee decide they don't like it, then they can revoke it.
I agree. I think that's the way to go. And would you, Your Worship and Chief Executive, I know the author of this report is Claire Barton. If we had
Mr Chair, I'm happy to work on the submission, as be one of the people that works on the submission. I'm very happy to do that.
Right. Mr Chief Executive, have you got resources to work with the Mayor to put in a pro forma submission? Which I suggested earlier could be kept to minimal, just pointing out in our submission the points that we wish to make additional, if there are any, or that we don't agree with in the other 3 submissions that have gone, keeping the actual work required to an absolute minimum.
I'm sorry, Mr Chairman, I have no idea. I haven't heard any suggestions yet about what was going to be different from what is in the submissions already there. So I don't know the scope of the work. And so, no, I don't know.
Okay, well, we'll carry on. I've got Councillors Courtney, Matheson and Rutledge to speak.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and I concur with Mayor Rachel when she says that we should, of course we should, we need to have a voice. Nelson City Council is respected throughout the country, from North Cape to the Bluff, and we need to have a voice on this very important issue. I won't use this phrase, that I'm dismayed or, anything like that, or it's not a good look, but truly it isn't. And this is funding for local government, very important funding for local government, and our voice is respected, and I think a late submission is absolutely essential, and we shouldn't degrade it in any way by saying, oh yes, same as us. But when TDC put one in, and we haven't, that's where into my mind springs the words, not a good look, because it just is so fundamental. And what everyone is concerned about today is funding of local government, and we just do need a view. And so I support it wholeheartedly, and given time, we may come up with some really, really important points of view to put into it.
Thank you, Councillor Courtney. Councillor Rutledge, I'm looking now for comments along the lines of finding a way through this.
Certainly, and I guess I concur with previous 2 speakers that it is important we have a voice, and I guess my mind goes back to all the work we did on freedom camping recently in the not too distant past, and some of the absolute caning we got for having to spend a little bit of money to try and deal with those situations, and I think we did it very well. But was it fair that that the cost lay solely here to achieve those outcomes? I don't have any particular concerns with the submission that was put in on our behalf, but I do think the idea of bringing Australians in has a lot of merit in the Pacific Islands. I think if you're flying in from international, it would seem odd to exclude 1 or 2 countries from that. And I do think that some of TDC's submissions, particularly getting clarity around the requirements around spend for capital or operational, is very, very important, because we know how challenging it is for us to fund that operational expenditure in particular. So it's not that I think anything has been missed. But I do think there are some things from the NRDA that as a local authority we might want to strengthen a little bit, and I do think we should have our voice in the mix.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you for the opportunity again just to add to this discussion, Mr Chair. And I had a few years on the Nelson Conservation Board. I was a public relations officer here for well over 6 years for the region, so I think my knowledge of the visitor market is as good as most. I would have liked to have seen, and I concur with the point from the Mayor, that we should have had a bit of a round table with Marlborough and TDC and ourselves to be able to give the Regional Development Agency some sort of guidance as to where we wanted to be on the levy and the split of the levy. If we remember, this was a brand new tax with significant impact that's available for every region in New Zealand. You don't have to contest it. You don't have to put a bid in for it. It will come our way. So what you do is you look at your work programs, you look where the impact points are, where our troubles have been growing over the years, and we talk about freedom camping, what infrastructure we need to upgrade to meet these increasing demands from the visitor market. And then we sit down and we say, well, let's go for the $35 and let's go for a bigger cut for us because we've got an urgency attached to those facilities, which at the moment we're trying to plan it to build through rates. It's not, it's what you would do. But you'll also talk to Marlborough and you'll talk to TDC and say, listen guys, they've come through your place, they're heading into ours and they're probably going into the TDC. What common issues have we got that we can lobby the government to help our cases, the three of us, as one body? And we do that in economic development and other things, and I firmly believe we should be doing that. I think we need to understand this is a very significant political move in the area of the visitor market. And we have a really good opportunity, as I said, without having to contest any sort of fund, to be able to make that work for us in all those areas. So I appreciate you allowing me to speak again, but this one is quite personal to me because of my background. And I remember when I was on the Conservation Board, I started to see the effects of the visitor market into our conservation estate. And when I was involved in the Kahurangi Management Plan and Enable Tasman, one of the issues that came up every time was what sort of facilities are we going to need to accommodate these visitors within 10 to 20 years. So I think we need to ask for a further submission. I prefer us to have those discussions with our neighbours and come to some sort of common understanding of what the purpose is going to be for our region from that levy. And I think it won't take a lot of work, Mr Chief Executive. I think it's a meeting that the political arm, with a bit of officer time, should be able to put together a submission to reinforce what's already gone through. Thank you.
Interestingly, Group Manager has just done a little bit of research, and the legislation is not looking to be going into the House before the second half of 2019, so that is some time out. Next on the list is Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. Yes, I echo Councillor Matheson's speech there. The top of the South, Marlborough, TDC, Nelson, and there are entrance points for visitors. But I'd also like to state that I like the Tasman's submission, the TDC submission, and I support that, the nuances as such on that more so than RDA one there, especially on the regards to the 70-30 split and the reasonings behind that. And that's where it's really hitting the pocket of the ratepayer, and as I've brought up in other topics in regards to our responsibilities as a ratepayer and a council provided services here in relation to what the central government provide and all should be providing, where some of that seems to be handed over to us as a greater good. So yes, the TDC one, I'm very supportive of what I've read.
Good. And
maybe we can acknowledge that, or talk over a coffee with TDC to get that reasoning and support to them.
Councillor Noonan.
I think seem to be in debate, but I've got a...
Well, we're not in debate, we're just in questions, really.
I'm just going to suggest, Mr Chair, that this hasn't been moved or seconded. No. So I'd like to take up the Mayor's offer of working on a small group along the lines of that we approve the Mayor, the Chair and Deputy Chair of Governance to review the NRDA TDC submissions and consult with Marlborough District Council
and LGNZ, please,
and submit a late submission. So if we could add that on to the to what's there, I would
happy to second that, Mr Chair.
Right, we now have another motion. So I'm looking for someone firstly to move the receipt of the report.
That was included. I was going to suggest that we that we just replace my clause with notes the content to changing, to actually appointing a small group to work on it. So it would read, the first part would be still the receipt of the report, followed by the approval of the Mayor, Chair and Deputy Chair of Governance to do that work.
So can we have that up on the screen? Councillor Ackland, while we're waiting.
My only comment really is I totally agree with all of the remarks that have been made by everyone around this table in terms of the importance of Nelson making submissions like this to central government. But in this particular situation, we haven't. Submissions have closed. We haven't formed our mind on what submission we would make as an organisation, as a governance body. That, in my mind, would be a decision of council. It might be of governance though, but in my mind at the moment it's a decision.
It's a decision of governance?
It is a decision of governance, great. So that's a decision we haven't made yet. So we could delegate a group, my understanding is that's fine if this committee wants to delegate a group after submissions have closed to look at the potential of making a late submission. That submission will still need to come back to this committee, right, for us to agree to.
The submission would go forward as a late submission, pro forma, and it would be included in it that it hasn't been endorsed by the full committee. So
well, there's no way that can go.
That pro forma submission goes through. The government knows exactly what the council's thinking, but is aware that if there is someone like yourself at another stage didn't like it, that would be pointed out.
No, well, Mr. Chair, that would be an improper use of council resource and name, because individual councillors are more than competent to write on their own basis, but if the organisation is represented, it needs to follow the delegations and the legislative vires of council, and it's not. So it would have to come. For instance, I don't accept, for instance, the 70-30 idea. I think 50-50.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Point of order. I'm sorry, I don't know the number of it, but I think that the sense of what I want to say is that the delegation, I think, was made quite clear that it sits with this committee. And I'd have to say that just last week I did a submission which then came to the committee for confirmation, and it was then the right of the committee to absolutely throw it out if they didn't like it. So it's the same. So it's the same thing. That's what we're doing here. Is we're asking those people to do the submission.
I agree, and Councillor Ackland, I think if the committee decides today to delegate to a group to do it, that group is open. As a member of it, I would be more than open for you or any other councillor to come forward and make aware what you as a committee member would like to see happen. And I'm aware that you're not a committee member, so that of this committee. Oh, I'm sorry, you are too. But even non-members would be more than welcome. So I think this is a way forward.
Hang on. As a result of the issue of staff members,
yes,
sorry, the issue of delegation.
Yes, I'm quite happy that we have delegated.
Well, we'll need advice from Chief Executive, sorry, Mr. Chief Executive, is that you can't, sorry, Nikki, you cannot delegate a decision to make a submission, in my mind, to central government without actual delegation on what that submission is.
Through the chair, if I can just explain a bit, there is a common practice for councils, because we often face this problem with timing, that officers, usually working with the chair and deputy chair, will put together what they think is a good representation of the likely position of council, send it to government in a pro forma way, saying it hasn't been approved, we're going to go through that process, we'll let you know when it is, there may be changes or we may have to withdraw it. And so that's the process. They get something within the time frame, and then we follow up as quickly as possible afterwards to confirm or otherwise.
Bearing in mind we're already outside.
We know that. Now, any other speakers?
Mr. Chair, just sorry, it's me here again.
You can't see what's on our screen, unfortunately.
No, that's absolutely fine. I've got the gist of it, and it sounds very sensible, so I'm quite comfortable with that. And I would say that the practice that Mrs McDonald's described has been the practice for as long as I've been an elected member, which is,
And Chief Executive confirms that as well.
And it's used all around the country, so I'm a bit puzzled about the last conversation. But yes, I think you've got a sensible way to move forward, and I do endorse it. I'm pleased the committee's decided that it will put in a submission given the significance of tourism to our region, and always I'd encourage councillors, whether they're members of a committee or not, that if they have strong views on an issue, especially when they've got the material and they've read the material, that they should feed through to those delegated to undertake that role as soon as possible, so that their thoughts can be considered in a submission. Of course, if it comes back to the committee and the committee don't like it, they can ask for it to be, it will be withdrawn.
So that's good common sense, Your Worship. After it's gone in, of course, it'll be reported to the next Governance Committee. So any further discussion on this around the table? I'm looking for someone now to make us progress and move.
Just to say that I'm comfortable being on that submission, and I think it's very important that our voice is heard.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Rutledge.
Yes, okay. So where are we on the moving and seconding?
Moved by Councillor Mooney.
You're happy to have the change in it? Yes.
I've got the change.
Yes.
I made the change. Yes, I'm happy with that.
And where's Councillor Dolberg? Is he in the seconder? Or?
No, it's Councillor.
Councillor Rutledge, right. Okay, we're quite clear on who's doing what. It's open for any further discussion, but I think we've thrashed it into a way forward. I don't think there's any. I'll put it all in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against? No. That's been carried. No, yes, no, sir. Now on our agenda, that takes us, thank you everybody, to item number 12, the exclusion of the public. Moved by Councillor Dolberg, seconded by Mr. Peters. All in favour, please say aye. Against, no. Carried. The cameras will be turned off now, please.
Oh, they want you to move that at the same time.
Okay. And could the mover please look at the agenda? Quite clear? I'll put it. All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes, no. Thank you, Rachel. Carried. We're now in confidential meeting.